Hey everybody, welcome to Board Online, Board Offline. Today we're bringing you part 2 in our Dungeon Universalis How to Play series. Today we'll be covering the setup. We, of course, had part 1 already, which covered how to create a hero. That was how to create a hero from scratch. In this video, we will be talking primarily about choosing preset heroes and won't go too much into the setup of custom heroes. For that, go back and watch part 1. Now, the first thing you'll need to do is to choose a quest. Here we've got Campaign and Quest book. This is the first Campaign and Quest book, I believe. There's also, of course, Campaign and Quest book 2 if you have that one. And when choosing a quest, you can choose a campaign, in which case you would choose the very first quest in that campaign, or in that case, it's the background. So M1 would be the first quest in the Great Campaign. Here's some smaller campaigns, and then down here you have the independent quests, which are essentially one-shots. So if we did want to start the Great Campaign, we would go to page 14 for M1, Free the Merchants. And this page would give us a lot of important information. Once you know which scenario you're going to be playing, you will then need to choose your dark player. Now, this could be the automated dark player, or you could be using an actual person to be the dark player. That choice will, of course, have some different ramifications in how you set up the game. If you have chosen to have a person play the dark player, then that person does not necessarily need to have a super solid understanding of the rules, though it is, of course, preferable if they do. Assuming there is another player who does know the rules very well, it will be enough for the dark player to read through these reference cards that are specific to the dark player to help them start getting an understanding of the rules. And then the player who actually knows the rules really well, of course, can keep the game moving. But again, as a dark player, it probably is beneficial to know the rules fairly well. Also, it generally would be a good idea for the dark player to be the same person from game to game, because as they gain experience, they eventually will be able to generate their own games and campaigns, which is covered in page 106 of the rulebook, and is not something that we'll be covering in any of the videos in this series. After you have your dark player, you're going to want to get all of your circular markers in an area that is easily accessible by the players. You'll then want to find the treasure cards, shuffle them up, the magic object cards, and the relic cards, and shuffle these 3 decks up. Keep them face down and in the general play area. Then, without shuffling, keeping them in whatever sort of organization you have. For mine, they are alphabetized, which is probably the best way, I would think, to do it. But whatever method of organization you have, you'll keep the furniture deck organized, the special elements, your various skills, your common objects, special objects, your armor and shield cards, which technically could be in different decks. I have chosen to alphabetize them in the same deck. There may be good reasons to keep them separate. I haven't run into that yet, and so for me, I have them in the same deck since they are organized behind the same organizer in the box. And then likewise, melee and ranged weapons I all have together as well. And these, I have given serious thought to separating these out, but right now I have them in combined decks like that. Take the achievement counter and place it in the play area. You'll need a dark player counter for both the 1s and the 10s rows, and one for the heroes as well. Also, keep the achievement card nearby. This will help you remember all the different ways that achievement points are gained. Next, players will need to either choose a pre-designed hero or a custom hero. Again, during this video, we'll be primarily focusing on the pre-designed heroes. Players have a wide variety of pre-designed heroes to choose from, with different races and classes and abilities, and so the players can look through this and make their selection. Some of these pre-designed heroes, such as Ahi here, do have additional background information in the form of these cards, and the player will want to check the deck of backgrounds to see if their character has one, and take it as well, as it has some character traits, special object information, stuff like that. Heroes that have these special backgrounds still start with all of the skills they are entitled to by their race and class, but this is just additional. And as a reminder, you'll see that you do have this here on the hero card. Use the background card in A0615 to help you remember. Next, you'll need to obtain your skills. Now, for the pre-built characters, you'll simply find their race, so catfolk in the case of Ahi, and assassin for their class in the case of Ahi, and we'll see what these have to say. So catfolk, outstanding agility, very high potential strength. They begin with the skill sharp senses and may use the weapon claws. Then for the assassin, we see they begin with the skills lethal blow and ambush. You, of course, at this point can begin organizing your character here. You're also going to want to go ahead and grab the crossbow, the scimitar, which probably would actually go where claws is, the common items, rope, pickaxe, picklocks, and healing herbs, and then the special item, Dragon Bile. By the way, I keep pronouncing this Ahi. I know that is a K. I know it's actually Aki or Aki, but I, for whatever reason, always see an H when I'm pronouncing that name. Now, if you were a spellcaster, you would select your spells after obtaining your skills. So, for instance, if you were actually Sylvia the Wizard, if you were Sylvia the Human Wizard, you can see here that you get 4 random water spells. And so you would take the water spell cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we've got Ice Wall, Crushing Wave, Water Elemental, and Water of Life. It is important to note that 2 heroes can never have the same spells, and so for that reason, it might not be a good idea to have 2 wizards that have water as their 4 initial spells, since you're going to be very limited in what you're able to do. So instead, maybe since we have Sylvia, we should also choose Malus here if we want another spellcaster who's a sorcerer and starts with 4 random tribal spells. At this point, they'll also choose any mercenaries or pets that will accompany them on the quest. You can see quite a few to choose from here, of course. We'll take a more detailed look at these as well as equipment in part 6 of this video series. The heroes will be placed outside the scenario, generally speaking, and then they will begin their activation in a starting square indicated by this symbol. The dark player will let them know where these starting squares are. Now let's discuss value points. Quests and epic events are going to vary based on the level of your group of heroes. And so before beginning a quest, you must calculate the total value points of your entire group. Your heroes, your mercenaries and animals, your special objects, your magic objects, your relics, all of these carry value points. So while something such as the scimitar and the crossbow do not have any value points, something like Dragon Bile has 1 value point here. Aki here has 10 value points, and so with all of the starting gear that Aki starts with, 10 plus 1 is 11, and the value points that Aki's bringing into the quest are 11. If they hired a dwarf mercenary, that'd be an additional 4 value points, or maybe a dog for 1 value point. Now, we've mentioned the dark player a couple times, and the dark player setup will be different whether you're using a human dark player or an artificial dark player. These two will be covered in 2 separate videos. The human dark player we're going to cover in part 4, the artificial dark player in part 5. If you're using a human dark player, though, they will be in charge of setting up the scenario and running the scenario, really. They'll be in charge of setting up the tiles seen here as the players explore them. So in this case, would have this tile here, and then this tile here. So now let's get into some of the terminology that you'll need to understand to better understand these scenarios. Every piece like this is a tile, and each tile is made up of multiple squares. The quest sheet will always show if multiple squares make up a single object. So in this case, you can see there's the 1 right here, corresponds to this 1 under furniture. So this is a horse cart that is taking up those 4 squares there. You'll also note that there are codes for the tiles here. The first 2 digits, in this case 02, is the tile number. Then the next, B in this case, shows that this is the back, whereas this side has an A because it's the front. And then the final letter there indicates the size of the tile. This is an A, which means this is a 10 by 8 square tile. This can run all the way from A all the way to I, anywhere from 10 by 8 all the way down to 2 by 2 squares. Some scenarios will have this yellow flag in one of the rooms. This indicates that it is the main room or section of that scenario and is going to be the most important one in the whole scenario. Generally, this is where you'll find your objective, and it's where you will find usually at least one treasure chest. You'll see, though, that not all scenarios have main rooms or sections, as this right here does not have that yellow flag. But you will find them in most scenarios. Anytime the game refers to a section, this is going to be an area that is limited by walls, doors, etc. A room can be a section, but not all sections are rooms. An indoor zoner scenario is considered to have a roof. So this would be an indoor zoner scenario, whereas this one would not be. Anything that refers to a passageway or corridor is going to be represented by a long tile, generally 6'2" or 6'1". We don't have any of those in this scenario or this one. But you can see here in Buried Kings, we have corridor here, here. There are 3 different color bases in Dungeon Universalis. The white are for your base level grunts, the yellow are for your elite, and the red are for your champions. There are also larger bases used for large and huge creatures, and heroes technically can use any color base they wish, but it's recommended to use the white bases since these are the most common bases in the game. There are quite a few dice in Dungeon Universalis. Anytime you see the term 1d6, it's of course referring to rolling a single 6-sided die, and therefore 2d6 would be 2, and so on. You also may see the phrase such as 4+ on 1d6, and what that means is you need to roll a 4, 5, or 6 on 1d6. You might see the phrase 1d6 plus 1. This means that whenever you roll, you then add 1 to your result. If you're ever told to roll a d3, since there are no 3-sided dice, you will roll a d6 and then divide the result by 2. In this case, you will round up, which means that if you were to roll a 1 or a 2, that would count as a 1, a 3 or a 4 would count as a 2, and a 5 or a 6 would count as a 3. Keep in mind, this is one of the few times you will round up in the game. In all instances of rounding, unless otherwise stated, as it is here, you always round down. In a game of Dungeon Universalis, generally speaking, the heroes will always begin the game. The game turns, then will alternate between the group of players who handle the heroes and then the dark player. Though keep in mind that some scenarios will indicate that the dark player goes first. During the hero's turn, the players can agree on who will go first. There is no set order for which hero will perform their turn before the others. This can be done in whatever order is most beneficial to the players. However, once a hero begins their turn, they must complete it before the next hero gets their turn. Then, once all heroes have finished their turn, the dark player will begin their turn. Oftentimes, players will have modifiers they can add to their rolls, such as +1 to an initiative roll. It should be noted that the most a character can get is a +3 bonus to their roll. That is from a combination of their skills, and those are their companions. However, if magic objects or spells are being used to gain these benefits, then the maximum is +5 instead of +3. A quest can end generally in 3 ways. All heroes have been knocked out, all heroes leave the scenario without completing the mission, or all heroes leave the scenario after completing the mission. They then will follow the mission accomplished, mission failed, and rewards portion here as applicable. A hero is able to leave a scenario by stepping onto the finishing or starting square and declaring they wish to leave. At this point, that hero is considered outside the scenario. It also should be noted, and we'll of course go through this in a bit more detail later, that once a quest is over, heroes and companions do not recover their vitality, fortune, or mana points until they rest in the appropriate places. Upon completing the scenario, all coins and objects acquired by the group of heroes should be distributed as evenly as possible. Throughout the scenario, heroes will be receiving achievement points based on these stipulations here: +1 for every white enemy slain, +2 for every yellow, +3 for every red, and so on down the list. These will be tracked here on this track. You can see you go through the 10s up here and so on, so this would be 35 points. The dark player, on the other hand, will score points being tracked with these tokens here. Will score points according to the fortune points used by the heroes. He'll get achievement points for knocking out heroes, and points generated each turn. The points generated each turn are specifically designed to press the adventurers into completing the scenario. With that in mind, once the adventurers, at least one of them, has reached the main room of the scenario, the dark player will not receive any more achievement points at the beginning of their turn in that way. At the end of the scenario, players will check to see what the achievement points mean. In the case of this scenario, there's not really anything there for the achievement points, but you can see over here in Rourke's Lair, +1 experience point if the heroes have scored more achievement than the dark player. And so that's a way that these achievement points could be used in the scenario. The heights of elements and the sizes of creatures plays a big role in Dungeon Universalis. Consider this. The ground has 0 height. Any tables or chairs found in a room would be considered to have 1 height. Something like the library will have 2 height. Statues will have 3 height. Something like large trees, walls, or columns will have 4 height. And then the sky itself would be considered 5 height. Creatures use a similar but slightly different sizing system. So a size of 1, which is similar to a dining room table, will be shown on a creature as the S for small. For size 2, you'll have the M for medium. Size 3, you'll have the large. And size 4, extra large. There will be some average size creatures that are represented by the S, but this is because they are low in overall height because they're quadrupeds. Anytime you hear or read the term much larger, it's referring to a case in which the difference is at least 2 points of height. So for instance, this large creature here is much larger than this small creature, while this extra large creature is much larger than this medium one. Now let's take a closer look at exactly what you'll find on the hero cards. You've got the hero's name, race, and class here, of course. Their value points are here. All newly created heroes will start with 0 experience and an initial value of 10. For the attributes of the hero, we've got movement, combat, strength, which is used for determining the damage inflicted in melee or for performing physical feats or carrying equipment. The shooting skill, this represents the character's ability to use throwing weapons and projectile weapons. The armor, as you can see, there are two icons here. This one is for natural armor. This one is for additional armor generated by equipment. When you're actually keeping track of your hero on here, you can put a slash and use one number to show your natural armor and then another number to show your total armor once you've added in that equipment. Here we have the hero's agility, which is used for athletic deeds such as jumping over pits. Here we have the intelligence, which is used for casting spells and detecting the effects of potions, solving riddles, avoiding ambushes. Here we have mana, which defines the magical power that a character is capable of generating. Here we have courage, which is necessary to face the fear produced by certain fearsome enemies, events, or spells. Here we have vitality, which reflects the physical endurance of a character, the number of wounds they can endure. If this is ever reduced to 0, then the hero is knocked out. Here we have dexterity, which is required for manual actions such as disarming traps or unlocking locked doors. Here we have perception, which is essential for discovering secret doors, traps, or hidden enemies, as well as for winning the initiative in combat. Here is the hero's accumulated experience. Of course, it's going to be 0 on this card, and again, will be kept track of here on your hero sheet. Here are the hero's fortune points, which represent the luck that the character has during a quest, either by chance, fate, or design of the gods. Fortune points are one of the main differences between a hero and other types of creatures. Here are the hero's coins. Here's the hero's weight. The value to the left of the bar shows the weight the hero is currently carrying, and the value to the right is the total weight they can carry. The max value is calculated by summing the hero's strength of 4 and vitality of 4, and then multiplying it by 2. Since this is a pre-designed hero, this is where you will find their skills, spells, and equipment. Then, of course, the hero's spells, skills, and then equipment for their body and hands will be placed in the appropriate locations around your hero sheet. Anything that's not currently equipped can be kept in your backpack. Now let's discuss tests in Fortune. Most attribute tests require rolling 2d6, adding the result to the appropriate attribute, and gaining a result of equal to or greater than 10, which is a success. Less than 10 would be a failure. Now that, of course, is the most common number that's required. However, sometimes you may be required to roll a different result, different than 10, and in that case, it will be clearly indicated. On a result of double ones, you will always fail. A result of double sixes will always be a success. Keep in mind, this does not mean that a 12 is always a success. It means that double sixes are always a success. It also should be noted that if you are conducting an opposing roll, which we'll talk about in just a moment, double sixes will not necessarily be a success because the opposing roll may also result in double sixes, in which case you'll need to add up your attributes. Opposing rolls can happen in melee combat, initiative rolls, and dispelling attempts. This means that each character involved in the engagement will roll 2d6 and add the required attribute, and the winner is the one with the highest score, after all modifiers. If there is ever a tie when rolling opposing rolls, and there's no indication of how to break the tie, you must roll again. Now, we mentioned fortune points earlier, found here. Fortune points have two primary uses during quests or travel events. They allow the hero to avoid a fatal blow, and they can modify a dice roll. When modifying a dice roll, the last roll made by the hero can be re-rolled once. Or the last roll of an enemy who has attacked the hero, or who has rolled an opposing roll, can be re-rolled. It's important to realize this can be done just once per roll, and all dice from that roll must be rolled again. This means the new result is the final one. It should be noted that fortune points cannot be used to modify the rolls in any way when searching furniture, determining the effects of special items or objects, or when determining the type of weaponry or magic object that has been found. Also, a hero's fortune points can only be used by that hero, and for that hero's own benefit. They may not be used by mercenaries or accompanying animals, and not even creatures that the hero has summoned himself. A hero who is already knocked out may not use any of their fortune points, and instead they should have used them to avoid a fatal blow. If a hero would be knocked out by either an event or an attack, they can immediately use a fortune point to roll a die, and if they get 5 or more, the effects and damage of that attack or event are completely ignored. If the hero did not get the desired result, they can use a second fortune point. In that case, no roll is required, and the results and the damage of the attack are automatically ignored. In other words, one fortune point lets you roll, and if that doesn't succeed, you use a second fortune point to automatically succeed. It should also be noted that due to certain travel events or special items or objects, a hero could receive fortune points in a temporary fashion. These fortune points are not recoverable after being used. The hero can only recover their own fortune points. And that concludes part 2 of our Dungeon Universalis instructional series. Be sure to come back for part 3. I know this series is taking a little while to come out. It is a very complex game, and I only have a few hours a week to film, so we're working on it. We're getting through it. We are going to produce this entire series, so please just be a little patient, but it is coming, I promise. Also, we will have part 3 of how to play the Gambler's Chess expansion for Kingdom Death Monster coming out very soon. And we have a few other great videos coming out as well. We will likely be publishing either a instructional video or a gameplay for Peacemaker's Horrors of War in the very near future, possibly both. Pretty straightforward game to get into, and I think it's going to be a great addition to that whole series of games, that whole world that it's Dawn of Peacemakers was the original game, and the Peacemakers part of that world. Then there is the Dale of Merchants, which is a great series of little games that combine into a bigger game, and Lands of Gowser. So that whole group of games has a new one coming out, Peacemaker's Horrors of War. Be sure to check out the unboxing for that, and like I said, we'll have some videos for it coming soon. And until next time, if you're bored online, bored offline.